Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome back to another episode of Voice of Youth. I'm Kirtan Singh, and today we're going to be talking about the latest updates with the coronavirus and the stage restrictions that have been implemented in Victoria. So initially, I had another episode planned, recorded, and that was going to be uploaded this week. But with these new announcements from the government and everything that's going on, it seemed right to kind of push that to next week and instead, discuss the new restrictions that have come into place. So I have two guests with me today, Gurneet and Jasdeep Kaur. So let's introduce them and then get onto the topic itself. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So how are you two doing tonight? You settling in all right with all the new restrictions going on?
Yeah.
Yeah? Tell us, Gurneet, you start off first. How have you been coping with the past few months in isolation?
So when lockdown started, I think it was around March for Victoria, I only went to uni. I had like 4 in-person classes, and then the rest of the year uni's been online. So I've practically been indoors since March. I've gotten quite used to it. Not gonna pretend it sucks, but I'm definitely used to it. Haven't really been done anything, been anywhere, and just been inside since March.
Yeah, it's been like that. How about you, Justine? More the same?
No, mine's pretty much the exact opposite because I work in health, Hannah. So the clinic that I work at has been open throughout the entire pandemic. I was cut down to part-time for a little while, but back at full-time again. So it's been really stressful, especially at the beginning when no one really knew what was going on and everyone was just panic mode and panic buying. But it's definitely better since we've settled into a bit of a routine. So as much as I'm still grateful that I have a job, unlike so many other people who've lost their jobs or have been made redundant. So
while we're talking about jobs, as much as I'd love to discuss the work environment you have and stuff, but today we'll focus on the restrictions itself. What are your two thoughts on the cutbacks that have been happening? Do you think that the way the government's been going about it have been fair to people who don't have jobs still, who aren't earning money? So, Justine, obviously you are still earning money, but do you know anyone who isn't or who's been laid off and getting JobKeeper or Seeker?
I know people who were made redundant who lost their jobs, but I currently don't know anyone who's been denied JobKeeper or JobSeeker. Everyone I know has either been granted one or the other, but it doesn't make it any less hard for someone who has to be at home and isn't earning any money. Definitely a really hard situation to be in.
Yeah, it is. But how about with you, Gurneet? Do you think that although people have this money now, they have this opportunity to maybe, for many cases, they're getting more money than what they would have earned on a normal week or fortnightly basis? Do you think this is a good way that the government has done it by giving everyone the same amount of money?
Well, firstly, when things weren't that bad, to me, it kind of does seem like the government's working a bit backwards. And understandably, our economy has fallen so harshly. Who knows when things are going to be back to normal, and recovery is going to take a long time. But when things weren't that bad, from my understanding, JobKeeper and JobSeeker had a higher benefit rate compared to now when, where we have a curfew, things are so much more worse off than they were before, and the government has introduced those cutbacks, which doesn't really make that much sense to me.
Okay.
It should have been the opposite, but I'm not a politician. I don't know how these things work. I'm sure that the government's trying to do everything in their power to make sure that they're somehow enhancing the community as well as looking after the economy, because at this rate, taxes are going to go up. Everything's already prices. Everything's already going really high. So
it's going to be a huge mess economically, and it is already. So then, because none of us, I would say, know have studied politics to that extent that we can always say all these things and really understand what's going through the minds of those in the cabinets and everything. So then from the people's perspective, have you two heard much about what people's thoughts are for the new restrictions, the curfew that you mentioned, Gurneet? Anything else around that?
I guess, you see all these comments in the Facebook section. People are saying, oh, this should have been done. This should have been done. When, we're not in the policy making position. All we can do is comment. But like it's tough. And I'm sure it's tougher for those people who are in that position where they make the call for us. But it was a long time coming. Like we had almost 1,000 cases in one night down in Victoria, and something had to be done. And I saw this statistic where apparently only 80% of Victoria were actually following the lockdown restrictions when they were first imposed. So I mean, some of us were following the rules, but there are those that haven't really been, So. Yeah.
So how about you, Jasdeep? What are your thoughts on it? What have you heard about it?
I definitely have, because I work in the health sector, so I've only been really hearing the health people. Everyone was quite agitated at the fact that there was hundreds of cases coming out daily, and it took a while to bring stage 4 restrictions back. We actually had a bit of a joke going on when we put on bets until when it would start, and only one person got close to August. Everyone else was saying mid-July would be stage 4. So there was a bit of a period where everyone was like, why is no one doing something? Why is there not stage 4 yet? Why aren't there tighter restrictions? Mainly because there were a lot of health workers cases, a lot of hospital outbreaks. There were also, like you mentioned, Gurneet, that a lot of people were not doing the right thing. There were also people who had gotten tested and didn't isolate. They were supposed to be isolated. So there were a lot of people who were not doing the right thing. And it reflected poorly on us as the rest of the community who were doing the right thing. So it was a tight position for everybody. And it was probably just those small few. I think there was this case of there was like a super spreader as well who was just apparently going everywhere spreading this virus. And it was just because of those few people who didn't stay indoors and didn't isolate, that the rest of us were dealing with hundreds of cases every day.
Yeah, like the Karens out there, the Bunnings lady, the one talking about you walking around Brighton or whatever it is.
Yeah, I don't know how accurate that story was.
Random people that would travel like an hour from their suburb to buy like Maccas, and there was that thing where someone bought like some Indian like curry thing from like and they got fined. So I don't know how people are risking all these like hefty fines just for things like Maccas, and like readily available in your own suburbs. So.
And and also there are alternatives. Like you don't have to go out to go buy the thing. You can order it online and get it delivered to you. And the biggest thing as well is that like when this all started, like they were like, oh, you're allowed to go out for exercise and everything. So many people decided to go exercise, but then they normally wouldn't have. Like if it was just an average day without the COVID-19 and stuff, they wouldn't go exercise. But all of a sudden, they want to express that right to. And I've got no problem if you want to start to become more fit and healthy in that sense. But if you just want to use it as an excuse to get some fresh air, you can easily just go to your backyard, maybe pull out one of those lawn chairs, sit in your backyard, get some fresh air. Then open a window. You don't have to go out and travel to get fresh air in that sense. If you want to, like, if you feel people feel restricted from their homes, and that's totally understandable. But there's always a simpler alternative, which is safer for other people.
Yeah.
And with the whole restrictions about not being able to travel 5 kilometers from your home, or like the radius of that region and stuff, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's enough? Do you think that's too much or too little space for most people? Jasdeep?
I think in the city, like in metropolitan Melbourne, where most of the restrictions are, it makes sense because in the city, most things are tight-knit. You can get most essentials within a 5K radius. you can get most of everything that you need within that circle. It's more for regional areas or areas that are a bit more further out from inner Melbourne. They might struggle a bit with the 5K radius because they're not as tight knit. They might have to travel further to get what they need. So if anything, if anyone has a right to complain, it's probably those people out in regional Victoria who can't get their essentials within that 5K. People living on the border of New South Wales and Victoria, they're in a tough spot right now because of the border issues. But if you're in inner city Melbourne, it's a really low chance that you can't get what you need in a 5K radius.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
And the important thing is what you need.
Yeah, what you need is the key thing there. You just need petrol and groceries, and that covers about 80 to 90% of it, with a few, special restrictions for special cases. In terms of medicine or appointments, that sort of thing, that's different. But in terms of what you need, most people in the inner suburbs of Melbourne, you will be able to get what you need in 5Ks. So I don't really see much of an issue with a 5K thing, especially if majority of Melbourne is now sitting at home anyway, and they're not going to work or not going to other places. So it makes sense that to reduce community transmissions, you stay in your own area, you stay in your local area. It just it doesn't make sense for everyone to be going everywhere for things that they can get in their local area if they're already there. It's a better way to reduce community transmission if you just stay in your local area, which 5K in inner Melbourne should cover it.
And Gurneet, what are your thoughts? Do you think this is enough for one-day trip? So when people need to go out, they are only allowed one trip to go do that, unless it's something like, oh, you need to let your dog out, make a quick trip, come back, don't go too far, don't go for too long. But if they're going to make one trip, that's what they're allowed to do. Do you think that's enough for the average person?
I mean, I guess the way I would look at it is it's only 6 weeks. 6 weeks is going to fly. And it's important to then consider the alternative as well. I mean, it's either follow the lockdown restrictions, which I'm sure they've brought in health professionals and all these other people to consider these things. It's either follow the lockdown restrictions or be exposed to the virus. And there are, some people out there who are immunocompromised. Often people look past that, these things are so much more worse off for people like that, people who can easily catch the virus. Someone like myself, actually. So, I mean, it's easier for me to follow these restrictions because I don't want to catch the virus. I know that there's something worse off out there. And that's kind of why I've been just sort of being able to chill. Like, I'm inside, I'm safe, I have my family around me. Something that keeps me very grounded is I was talking to my dad the other day, and I was, complaining. I've been indoors since March. And he was like, look, have you really lost your freedom though? Because there are, people, say, in jails in India who haven't even done anything wrong. And, they've spent their whole life, 20 years. Even, Jaggi Jol, who's a UK citizen, been indoors, been locked in prison for 1,000 days. And I haven't even completed 365 days in the year. It's going to be another 6 weeks. So, I mean, I sort of do these comparisons to make myself feel better, and, it's working. I'm just being, really content.
Yeah, put it in perspective.
Yeah.
And thinking that is great, but it's also important to also know that there are people out there who, just because you're feeling bad and someone else out there is possibly worse, doesn't mean you can't, like, share or accept the fact that you do feel bad, because everyone has their own threshold. There's always a certain, like, level at the average everyone should understand and follow, the point of, like, wearing masks or sanitizing your hands, that kind of stuff. Everyone should follow. Like, even if you feel like it's imposing on you, there's, like, a certain benchmark there. And do you both think about the whole mandatory masks? Now it's mandatory throughout the whole of Victoria. And then you can even just wear a normal scarf, and that's all that's been going on for a bit now. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's fine, justified, or do you think people should be forced to wear those properly N95 masks and all these surgical masks and wear them properly, because a lot of people do just wear them, let the drips over the nose, or constantly touch the mask, and I've seen that a lot. So what are your thoughts on that? Someone who's working in the medical field, Jasdeep, what are your thoughts?
There's definitely a lot of irresponsibility in terms of masks. I do feel like a lot of people aren't actually educated on how they're supposed to be wearing one and how they're supposed to be using one, and the fact that they can't actually touch them. So I think that if you're going to make everyone wear face coverings, you have to educate them on what the right way to do that is. I've had to correct so many people for the way that they've been wearing their masks when they've come in for appointments, because they haven't had their nose covered, or they've always been touching it, or it's not fitted them properly. So I think it was a good step in trying to curve and bring the wave down, but people needed to be shown how to do that. Because if someone's just walking around, like you said, with a loosely fitted mask, it's defeating the purpose of it. But yeah, I think there should have been a little bit more effort in educating people on how to do that, because there's so many people who are not doing it correctly.
So going forward, we'll talk about what you both think should happen post the 6 weeks, or even within these 6 weeks, more restrictions would come into play. Do you think that the government should somehow educate the people? How would you think they should go about doing that?
The same way that they've been putting out all of the information regarding the restrictions. So every night we get every day we get an update. Every day we have some sort of new rule or some new imposement on what we do, and it's broadcasted everywhere. But the details of their new rules, they don't get broadcasted. That they're usually just up on the website. But if they've given a new rule about wearing a new mask, if they could also broadcast the new information on how to wear it specifically, get someone to stand up and show people in the crowd or when they're doing their lives that this is how you do this, and everyone just follows that pattern, that rule. So if you incorporate it into their actual rule making or policy making broadcasting system, every news channel is at the moment, watching Dan Andrews go live. If you do it at one of those events, everyone who watches that live stream will know how to wear a mask properly.
Yeah,
and then they won't have that excuse.
I feel like the government has done a few things. I've seen some on TV where they say, not to touch your mask and to wear it properly. I've seen a couple of things. So maybe there could be more, and maybe, like you said, during these popular news broadcastings and such. So, Gurneet, what do you think is going to happen in the future? What would you like to see within these 6 weeks, or even post 6 weeks, regarding either the politics about it or the people and what they're going to do?
Well, firstly, I think what the government has done recently, they've really acknowledged the mental health aspect of these things. So the government funded a lot of mental health programs, and recently I think they've made a mental health care plan for a lot of the people who want to access some form of, mental health help. So I think things like that during this time, it's come to a lot of people's attention that, mental health struggles are real, especially during isolation where people might be feeling alone. And, especially now we can't really see anyone. Normally I would go for walks with one of my friends who lives down the street, and can't do that anymore.
Yeah, and beyond that as well, like regarding mental health, a lot of the things, like the most important thing to some people, is the students out there. So the kids in early childhood and whatnot, they, to them, their friends are some of the most important things, and that social life that they live when they go away, or how the parents need that time to go to work and need someone to take care of their children. They're still allowed to have a nanny come by, or they're still allowed to go bring their child to the childcare, and all these things are in place, even for people with learning disabilities. And it's great to see that's happening, and hopefully it can grow in the future. So do either of you have any final thoughts for anything you'd like to share about the new restrictions, about what you'd like to see in the future, or just any thoughts in general? Either one of you.
I do want to say that I can still hear cars, like so many cars pass by my window past 8 p.m. And yeah, so I don't know what's happening. But it's good to see that there are so many police cars, army people walking around. So things are like quite serious. I hope people are actually starting to listen. And worst comes to worst, we might be extended for another time, but
and a longer curfew as well. We're lucky this curfew is only overnight and not the whole day. You're stuck at home and you only get 1 hour to go shopping or anything of the sort. Jasdeep, do you have any final thoughts?
No, just try do your best. I know it's like really, really hard to stick to the rules, especially because I think at the beginning, everyone was like, oh yeah, I can just try some new things at home, and people were trying fun things, but that didn't last very long. And it's understandable that everyone's just sort of over it by now. It's been months like this, but if we just pull together, try to do the right thing, and hopefully come out on the other side.
It's a collective effort. Everyone needs to follow the rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that will do it for this episode. Thank you to Gurneet and Jasdeep for joining us, talking about the restrictions, the new measurements in place, what we hope to see for the future, and some of our experiences from before the latest stage restrictions. So if you have any thoughts, anything you'd like to share about what you're facing, about what maybe your child or your parent, grandparent is currently experiencing with life in lockdown, please let us know in the comments section. Reach out to anyone that you need. Talk to your family, talk to a counselor, reach out to any of the mental health organizations. Chetana, if you have anything you want to share, go for it. Do it. This is a place as well, Voice of Youth. If you have anything you want to talk about, let me know and we can talk about it. So for one final time for this episode, I'd like to thank Gurneet and Jasdeep, and thank you all for watching. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.